The world is trembling under a gray sky. My voice cuts through static, heavy with history. Good evening. This is Wolf Blizzard, and tonight, the air itself is speaking. The loudspeakers across the torn horizon hum with static and defiance. Their message? The Russians are retreating. The Pokrovsk line has collapsed. The soldiers, the very heart of their empire, beg for prison over the kill zone. I repeat it once, then twice. The words sting like cold iron. I can almost hear the disbelief ripple across Europe, across every home that has waited, prayed, and bled through silence for months. We've been told this war was endless, that the trench lines would never move, that the sky over Donetsk would never clear. But tonight, something changes. The loudspeakers scream, and history leans forward. I stand there, microphone trembling in my hand, the wind biting through the ruins. Behind me, flashes of light, not fireworks, not celebration, but the fading roar of artillery finally silenced. Ukraine's voice cuts through the dust. We are still here. We have not fallen. We will never fall. And as those words echo through the loudspeakers, I realize this is not just another battle update. This is a declaration, a heartbeat from a nation that refused to die. The shattered truth: when I arrived at the Pokrovsk front 3 days ago, I expected exhaustion, perhaps surrender. But what I found was something else entirely. In the frost-covered fields, I saw Russian soldiers, once hailed as invincible, crawling out of the trenches, throwing down their rifles, their eyes pleading not for victory, but for mercy. Some begged to be sent back to prison, anywhere but the front. One man, his hands shaking, voice cracking, whispered to me through broken English, "I don't want to kill anymore. I don't want to die here. Tell them I surrender to the earth." And I wrote it down, because words like that must never vanish. Behind him, the ruins of a command post still smoked, the aftermath of another Ukrainian strike. But amid the wreckage, there was something else, a Ukrainian medic kneeling beside a wounded Russian, wrapping his arm with torn cloth. I asked her why she was helping the man who had tried to kill her brothers. She didn't look up. She simply said, "Because hate cannot rebuild what love will one day need." Those words haunted me as the night fell, the kind of sentence that tears through your chest and refuses to leave. The broadcast no one was ready for. Back at the mobile broadcast tent, our satellite link flickered with static. Headquarters in London wanted confirmation. "Wolf, is it true? Are Russian units really abandoning Pokrovsk?" I looked at the footage again. Lines of exhausted men, hands raised, stumbling toward Ukrainian positions under white flags. Some without boots, some without hope. Yes, it was true. And for the first time in this long and brutal war, truth sounded like thunder after endless silence. The feed went live. Loudspeakers on. I said, "Ukrainians declare Russian defeat." It wasn't a boast. It was a heartbeat. The sound of survival amplified through metal and courage. The price of survival, but victory is never clean. You can smell the cost in the soil. Every victory here is written with trembling hands, with names carved into helmets, with empty photographs pressed into jackets. I walked through a Ukrainian outpost that night, quiet except for the faint hum of radios. A young soldier, maybe 19, stood staring at the flickering screen showing the captured Russians. He didn't cheer. He didn't smile. He only said, "We lost too many to call it victory," and then he went back to cleaning his rifle. Methodical, mechanical, emotion buried under duty. Because that's what survival demands. You keep moving. You keep fighting, even when your heart begs you to stop. The moment the sky broke around midnight, the first snow began to fall, white flakes over black earth, as if the heavens were trying to cover the blood, to heal the ground that had seen too much. And somewhere far beyond the horizon, in Moscow's steel silence, the generals stared at maps that no longer obeyed them. The Pokrovsk front was gone. The soldiers had walked away. The myth of Russian invincibility had bled into the mud. I whispered into my microphone, "History has a cruel way of correcting arrogance." And I felt the weight of every war that came before, every empire that thought itself immortal until the people it crushed rose again. Betrayal, the coldest enemy, but beneath the triumph, there was betrayal, silent, poisonous, devastating. Reports filtered in that Russian commanders had ordered artillery strikes on their own retreating units to restore discipline. Deserters turned into targets. Courage turned into crime. I could hardly breathe as I read those transmissions aloud to the world. Footage confirms Russian soldiers pleading for transfer to prison camps. Anything to avoid returning to Pokrovsk. Imagine that. Men begging for prison because freedom had become a death sentence. This is what tyranny looks like when the mask falls off. Not strength, not pride, just fear, raw and trembling. The lesson hidden in the smoky as dawn broke. I stepped out to film the sunrise. The air was sharp, the horizon painted gold. Somewhere beyond, the loudspeakers were still playing, "We are still here. We have not fallen." It struck me then, this wasn't just about Ukraine and Russia. It was about every human being who has ever stood against impossible odds and refused to kneel. Because wars don't just happen on maps. They happen in the soul, between the part of us that gives up and the part that refuses. And as I stared across that scarred landscape, I realized we all have our Pokrovsk, our kill zone, our breaking point. But survival begins the moment we decide to rise beyond it. Camera pans slowly over the battlefield. Smoke rising, flags torn, Day 37 at the Pokrovsk front. I whisper into the recorder. The snow has turned gray from ash. The silence here is heavier than gunfire. And yet, amid the stillness, stories burn, stories too painful to air, too human to forget. The collapse of illusions when I first walked into the captured Russian camp. I expected chaos. What I found was confusion. Soldiers sitting quietly by makeshift fires, staring at their hands as if realizing for the first time what they'd done, what they'd become. A man in tattered uniform approached me. His face was gaunt, eyes hollow. He didn't look like a soldier anymore, more like a ghost carrying regret. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph, a young girl, maybe 6 years old, smiling beside a birch tree. He said in a cracked whisper, "She doesn't know where I am. Tell her I didn't die as a monster." I had no words. I pressed my hand over the photograph, and all I could think was, in every war, there are fathers who never come home, and daughters who never stop waiting. When I broadcast that story later that night, the world fell silent. People didn't hear a report. They heard the echo of humanity beneath the rubble of ideology. The betrayal within the truth is never welcome in war. Hours after my report aired, encrypted messages arrived. Cease unauthorized transmissions. Tone down the emotional coverage. Stick to facts. Wolf, not feelings. They didn't understand. Feelings are the facts that history forgets. Behind closed doors, commanders fought over narratives while soldiers fought for survival. The Russian army had begun executing deserters publicly to make examples, to restore order. But the footage I had, the one showing soldiers begging for prison, told another story. It revealed a rot from within, a war eating its own sons. I faced a choice then, obey silence, or speak, and I chose to speak. That night, I won't live again. No scripts, no filters, just the truth. This is Wolf Blitzer, reporting from Pokrovsk. Russian soldiers are not fighting for victory. They are fighting for the right not to die meaningless deaths. When men beg for prison instead of battle, it is not cowardice, it is humanity gasping for air. Those words would cost me friends in high places. But silence costs more. When hope feels like betrayal. Not long after, I met Elena, a Ukrainian nurse who'd been at the front since the first invasion. Her hands were scarred, her eyes perpetually tired, but when she spoke, her voice was pure steel. She said, "Every time we win a battle, it feels like betrayal, because the ones we lost are not here to see it." I asked her why she kept going. She smiled faintly and said, "Because stopping would mean their sacrifice meant nothing." That night, she went out again to the field hospital near the ruins of Pokrovsk. She never came back. When I heard the explosion hours later, my legs gave out. And for the first time since this war began, I cried on camera. Not for the politics, not for the headlines, for her, for all the Olenas who carried the world's pain and still found the strength to heal others. The storm of revenge or avenge is a strange thing. It comes dressed as justice, righteous, sharp, beautiful in its simplicity. But when you hold it too long, it burns your hands. After Olena's death, I felt it, that fire inside, whispering, tell the world to strike harder, make them pay. But I saw what vengeance looked like up close. I saw the prisoners of war, their faces shattered not by bullets, but by guilt. A Ukrainian soldier, young, trembling, pointed his rifle at a captive and shouted, "You killed my family." The captive fell to his knees, sobbing, "I didn't even know why I was sent here." And in that second, I saw the entire war condensed into two broken men, both victims of someone else's ambition. I stepped between them. I said, "If you kill him, the war wins twice." He lowered his rifle. He walked away crying. Camera opens over a gray horizon. The first rays of morning stretch across a silent field once known as the Pokrovsk kill zone. Smoke rises faintly from distant ruins, but the air carries something new, stillness. Fragile and real. This is Wolf Blitzer, and for the first time in months, I can say these words without fear. The guns have gone quiet. The loudspeakers that once blared defiance now play only one sound: wind through broken windows, whispering through the wreckage like a hymn. The war has paused. The world holds its breath, and as I stand here, surrounded by both the living and the ghosts, I realize every war eventually ends, but not every nation survives its silence. The aftermath you walk through what remains of Pokrovsk, streets that were once battlefields, now rivers of mud and memory. The air smells of wet earth, diesel, and hope. Ukrainian flags hang tattered but proud over shattered walls. Children's chalk drawings, suns, hearts, and birds cover a bunker door. They remind me of something simple and divine. The world always rebuilds itself from the innocence it tried to destroy. A soldier passes me a cup of tea, his hands trembling from cold and exhaustion. He says, "We buried the last of our fallen today, but they didn't die for land. They died so that truth could live," and I believe him. Because in the end, every war boils down to a single, impossible question: will we learn, or will we repeat? The mirror of humanity in KYV, celebrations echo through the air. But even in triumph, there's a quiet guilt, because behind every victory are faces that never return. As I look around, I see both sides of the mirror: Ukrainians rebuilding with trembling hands, and Russians, broken, captured, whispering prayers for forgiveness. War has no clean lines. It breaks everyone, even those who win, and yet, somehow, it also reveals something pure, the resilience that no bomb can erase. No dictator can silence. It's in the old woman sweeping glass from her doorway. It's in the boy teaching his younger sister how to write her name again. It's in every trembling heartbeat that dares to keep going. The truth about defeat when the Russians begged to be sent to prison instead of the Pokrovsk front. The world saw fear, but I saw something else. I saw the moment when lies could no longer carry the weight of truth, when propaganda finally cracked and humanity slipped through. That is the true defeat, not on the battlefield, but in the soul. When a soldier stops believing in the cause he kills for and starts remembering the face of the person he became, that's where empires crumble, not under missiles, but under memory. The quiet heroes everywhere I turn. I see the quiet heroes, the ones history will never name. The nurse who carried bandages instead of bullets. The teacher who wrote lessons by candlelight while rockets screamed overhead. The farmer who planted wheat in a field still laced with mines. The mother who taught her child to say tomorrow will be better, even when she wasn't sure. These people, they are not in uniform, but they are the backbone of victory. They remind me that heroism is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to surrender to it. A message to the world tonight. I don't speak as a journalist. I speak as a witness. I've seen what war takes and what it leaves behind. It takes youth, love, laughter, the sound of a piano that will never be played again. But it leaves behind lessons carved into the earth, whispered through generations. Freedom is never owned. It is rented, and the rent is due every day in courage. If you are watching this from a safe home, far from the thunder of artillery, remember this: every comfort you hold was once someone's sacrifice. Every peace treaty was written in someone's blood. So use that peace wisely. Protect it fiercely. Because silence, too, can be a kind of violence when it ignores the cries of the broken. The return of light. Camera turns east, the sun finally rising over the scarred horizon. For a moment, everything glows: the ruins, the helmets, the faces of survivors, the loudspeakers. Once instruments of war, now play a voice, a child's voice, clear, trembling, and beautiful. We are still here. We have not fallen. We will rebuild. I lower my microphone. I let the silence speak for me. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. The life lessons etched in ash standing here. I understand the simple truth I've chased my whole career. You cannot report the human spirit. You can only feel it. It's the invisible force that lifts people out of trenches, that rebuilds homes, that forgives the unforgivable. It's what drives a medic to risk her life for an enemy soldier. It's what drives a child to sing amid ruins. That, not missiles, not armies, is the real superpower. And maybe, just maybe, the world needed to shatter so we could finally see what's worth saving. The final broadcast. This will be my last report from the Pokrovsk front. The war has changed me, not into a cynic, but into a believer that humanity, though bruised and bleeding, still stands taller than tyranny. Before I sign off, I want to say this, not as a journalist, but as a man who has seen both darkness and dawn. Forgiveness is not weakness. Mercy is not surrender. And love, yes, love, is not naive. It is rebellion in its purest form, because where hate divides, love rebuilds. Where war consumes, compassion creates. And where death claims, hope resurrects. The last word sun is risen fully now. Its light touches everything, the graves, the flags, the broken helmets. For a heartbeat, the whole world feels quiet. I speak my final words into the microphone, voice trembling, but steady. This is Wolf Blitzer, reporting not from a war zone, but from the rebirth of a nation that chose courage over comfort, truth over fear, and humanity over hate. The loudspeakers are still on, but now they speak peace, and as the broadcast fades to silence, I remove my earpiece, look to the sky, and whisper to the ghosts around me, we told your story. The world heard you. The wind carries the sound away, over the fields, into the hearts of those who still believe. Because in the end, wars don't define us. How we rise after them does. Screen fades to black. The words appear in silence, loudspeakers on. Ukrainians declare Russian defeat. From ashes, we became the echo of freedom.